So Frank Dux, as far as I know, wants to have the martial arts world regulated. Like he doesn't like the fact that it's not regulated, which is interesting. Yeah, okay, that's your
Yes,
reaction. That's
bold
funny.
of him, bold of him to assume they would come down in his favor if they did.
Hey guys, welcome to part 2 of my interview with Phil Elmore, further discussing the issue with frauds in the world of martial arts. Make sure to watch part 1 of the interview, by the way, which I titled Martial Arts Frauds Discussed by a Martial Arts Fraud? Because a lot of people think Phil Elmore himself is a fraud. So I put a poll, that motivated me to put a poll in the community page asking, who do you guys think is the biggest fraud? Frank Dux, Phil Elmore, Viking Samurai, or the Biden administration? The Biden administration, by the way, is winning by a landslide. Well, a lot of you guys are like taking that way too serious, man. Like, I put myself in the poll, right? It's a joke. Don't take things so damn serious. So even if you're like the most ardent Biden supporter because he's so well spoken,
I was going to put him
and he raised such an amazing family, don't take things so serious, man. You should be able to like laugh about this stuff, right? Anyway, funny enough, Phil and I are actually tied in that poll. So even, on my own channel, there's plenty of non-Viking Samurai supporters, apparently, which is funny. But at least they're watching. Speaking about political stuff, though, somebody sent me this funny meme. So I'm sure you all seen this, the Chuck Norris one. You know, if Chuck Norris goes to a feminist rally, he comes back with his shirt ironed. Well, someone sent me this one on Frank Dux. When Frank Dux goes to a feminist demonstration, all the feminists become Trump supporters. So that got me to thinking, maybe we should just start creating a bunch of memes with Frank Dux, try to out-meme Chuck Norris, right? I think the whole thing actually started with Vin Diesel, and then it like moved on to Chuck Norris, and he's kind of held that meme crown for probably like 15 years or something. Anyway, check out a video I did on that. I'll link it in the description below. But I think Chuck's time is done as far as like being king of the memes. I think we need a new candidate, and I propose Frank Dux. We could come up with some really funny stuff. I don't know if he's going to like that or not, but anyway, it's a good idea. If you like this kind of content, please help support the channel. Hit the like button, subscribe, share the video, and let's get on to the second part of the interview with Phil. Let me ask you this, man. You're like aligned with Don Rowley, right?
He is a friend of mine, yes, has been.
Yeah, and he's heavily associated with the Bujinkan, right?
As far as I know.
Bujinkan, or however you pronounce it. What do you think about, real quick, what do you think about that whole organization? Because there's a lot of people saying, oh, those guys are all frauds and they're fakes and they pay for their rank.
I don't think that's true. I think like a lot of organizations, I suppose there could be good people and bad people within it. I don't pretend to know the intricacies of that organization. I think that when we talk about ninjutsu and you want to say, well, what's legitimate in ninjutsu? I think there's only a few organizations like the Bujinkan and the Genbukan that have sort of been legitimized by the passage of time, meaning that enough people have found value in them for long enough that insofar as any ninjutsu group could be legitimate, I think they are. It's kind of like we know certain people started certain religions, and when enough time goes by, if those religions stick around, it doesn't matter that I used to know the guy who started it. Now it's 100 years later, nobody knows the guy who started it. And so suddenly it has mainstream acceptance. And that's happened more than once. So something being legitimized by the passage of time is a concept that I think not enough people understand. It doesn't mean that just because you did something bad and it's now 100 years since I did the bad thing. Well, if it was bad and didn't have value, it's still bad and didn't have value. So there's a martial art that I've cited more than once called Haikuta, which was invented by a guy named Lee Kroll, who fancied himself as Doc Lee, D-O-K, Defender of Kings. And Lee Kroll published a book called Haikuta, Way of the Fist, which I believe you can still buy on Amazon, even in Kindle format. And he claimed that the martial art was the same system used by the Pharaoh's bodyguards in ancient Egypt.
Wow.
In point of fact, it's a very silly martial art that doesn't have much value to it. So no matter how much time goes by, even if the same amount of time from ancient Egypt to now goes by from now to the future, in the future, they're not going to look at Haikuta and go, wow, that was where it was at.
Yeah,
because it isn't
funny. Let me ask you this. Now, obviously, I think everybody knows what you think about Frank Dukes' stories and his history. What do you think about him just despite that as a martial artist? Like if you were to train or if somebody were to train with Frank Dukes like right now, do you think he has anything beneficial to offer?
He probably does. I mean, I've never heard that Frank Dukes can't fight. I've never been told that by somebody. He's a big guy. He seems like a powerful guy. He's been trained at some point somewhere. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know a lot about the curriculum he teaches. For me, it was my point of criticism for Dukes was never that stuff doesn't work. I don't know. I don't care. You could train in flying Pegasus jiu-jitsu all you want. It doesn't matter to me. What mattered to me was just that he was lying about stuff. I think you when you have to lie to sell what you're doing, your integrity comes into question. There was a guy who had it was kind of like a wrestling system, and he was claiming that it was a system used by the ancient Roman gladiators. It's like, what? Why do you have to add that part? We both know it's not. We know this is an ancient Roman gladiator foo. So stop it. Just do what you're doing and don't add
It's
this
the marketing,
fanciful.
man. When people
Yeah.
think of a Roman gladiator, they conjure up that image of like, what a badass. If I could
Well, and I
learn what
get
they learned,
that, but
I would be a
and
badass too.
if the system was sold as I was inspired by the Roman gladiators, that's one thing. But when they have to sell you a lie, like this comes directly in an unbroken line from these people, like it forces you to ask the question, why does this person have to lie to get me on their side? Why can't the merits of what they're doing speak for itself? 52 blocks, another good example. The actual techniques taught by people who say they are doing 52 blocks may or may not have value in and of themselves. But I do not believe the backstory of how this system was supposedly handed down in secret from, I don't know, the slaves to prison populations, and that it's a single coherent body of techniques that can all be related to each other. I just don't buy that. I think it's a bunch of people doing a variety of things and calling it that name. Now, as time goes on, if it ends up being legitimized by the passage of time and people find value in it, fine, but I question the origin story. No one who does Wing Chun thinks that it matters that the system was attributed to one woman centuries ago. It doesn't matter. It's what's the system doing for me now.
Mm-hmm.
So anybody who said, you have to buy my Wing Chun DVD because of that lady, like, what? It just wouldn't make any sense. So in terms of Dukes as a martial artist, I really don't have an opinion. It's really, really important to him that you be impressed. I don't mean you personally. I mean us as the
Sure.
world. It's very important to him that we be impressed. And that's why he tells all the stories that he does. But as far as the actual reality, I don't know.
You know what's funny? Some of the stuff that I even got sold on from Black Belt Magazine, I remember I was taking Taekwondo like in the 90s, and there's like an article, not an article, but an ad, defeat anybody in like 30 seconds or less, most deadly techniques. And I ordered it, VHS copy, horrible production values, horrible audio, bad lighting, whatever.
It
And
was
then like some
literally
of the
every VHS
techniques,
tape.
real quick, because I was in middle school, and I wasn't the biggest kid, which is one reason why I got into lifting weights and martial arts. But I'm like, oh, I could use this stuff. This is probably better than the Taekwondo I'm learning. And then I'm watching it, and it's just like, these techniques are trash. The guy's just like stomping on the other dude's foot. It's like, what? I paid $20 for this,
Yeah, there's a couple different angles to come at it. There's like, I make a distinction between people who are fraudulent because they're lying to you and a system that simply isn't effective. There are plenty of people who are willing to call others who do a martial art they don't approve of frauds. I think that's wrong. If say you don't like the techniques of the Bujinkan, I've heard one person describe it as, well, it's just sloppy jujitsu. They're not doing a great job. I don't like it. Well,
Mhm.
okay, you can have that opinion of the martial art, but to then look at an individual Bujinkan exponent and say, he's a fraud. Well, no, fraud implies falsehood, deliberate falsehood. You may say that he has misguided confidence in what he's doing, that it doesn't really work. By that definition, half the strip mall karate schools in the nation are fraudulent because they're teaching people stuff that they're never going to use and is never really going to work for them. Especially all the kids classes and stuff like that, which are really just kids classes in karate are generally a glorified babysitting system that helps the school stay solvent. It's not teaching these kids to be, finely tuned warriors. It may be teaching them manners and discipline.
I
So
guess there's some benefit, sure.
oh well, yeah, there's definitely benefit. I have no problem with these programs existing. I'm just saying that there's ineffective martial arts and then there's frauds. I don't think the two are necessarily the same thing. In a lot of cases, people who are lying to you are also peddling something that's not effective. But I think we have to take into account before we judge the nature of any given martial art or person system or the body of work that they are showing us. I think we need to look at what are their intentions and are they being honest? Because you can be honest and be bad. You know,
I
you
mean,
can
with
be bad
me,
at it.
it always just comes down more to the individual. Like, there are guys who can make boxing work great or strictly wrestling. And then there are other guys who are wrestlers who would just get mauled in a street fight, while another guy could actually probably do pretty well. To me, it's always like about mindset, man, and attitude, right? Like, you have to have a certain viciousness in a real fight. I'm not talking about like a competitive fight, though that helps too. But the thing is, like, people will trash on Aikido all the time, but trust me, whether they use techniques or not, there are individuals who's probably trained in Aikido that just because of them, it didn't matter if they trained in Aikido or if they trained in kickboxing, they would just be able to destroy somebody and defend themselves. They just, despite what they learn. Now, I'm not taking away, saying, oh, it doesn't matter what system. My whole point is it really matters more on the individual. Now, take that same individual and use something that is, quote, more effective, and I'm sure he would be a bigger badass. But I really think it just comes down to the individual more than the style at its core.
It does, but on the other end of the spectrum, you've got people who are bad people, but good martial artists. There is a martial arts guy who I'm not going to name because I don't want to get sued, who is wildly legendary for being a cokehead. And I've even seen drawings of him, like I bought a martial arts book that was done in a comic book style once, and they mentioned him. And the drawing of him had these lines under his eyes that made the drawing look like a cokehead. That's how ingrained this guy is. I have never heard a single good thing about him as a human being. I've never heard anybody who's worked with him say, oh yeah, I liked him. They all say that he's a viciously bad person, but I've never heard that he can't fight. Oh, he can fight. And when you're that mean to everybody else, you have to be able to fight. I don't want to get sued. I'm not going to mention this guy by name.
But if it's a known fact, like, I don't think you could get sued for that. Right?
I try to be more careful than certain people who are happy to make stuff up out of whole cloth and who don't seem to care. Like, it is notoriously hard to sue people for things like libel and defamation, especially across state lines. Every once in a while, though, when people are in the same state, sometimes it'll happen. And my respect for not getting sued goes all the way back again to the early 2000s. There was a Japanese martial arts forum called Ibudo, where ironically I got banned after I published Street Sword for Paladin Press because apparently that was too offensive to abide, and I was shown the door. But there was a guy there, Don Cunningham, who has since passed away, who was a traditional Japanese martial arts exponent and the author of a book called Secret Weapons of Jiu-Jitsu. Mm-hmm. And Don hated my guts. He did not approve of my youngsters' newfangled ways. He didn't like my non-traditional approach. He didn't think I had any business being on that forum, and he wasn't afraid to say so. But Don Cunningham was also an honest man. And when he said something about, and I'm doing this from memory, I believe it was Rod Sakarnowski of Juko Kai, names which may or may not mean anything to you, but he got sued for basically saying these people made up their credentials or these people were lying about what they said their ranks were. I forget the details. Well, when he got sued, that made me upset because he was being sued for telling the truth.
Wow.
And as the case went its way, Don spent an awful lot of money defending himself only to have this guy not show up. And the case eventually got dismissed. And it all ended up in Don's favor, but he spent, like $10,000 in legal fees.
That's annoying and a headache.
Well,
I've been threatened a couple of times on my channel with stuff other people had said, like other guests have said. I'm like, I didn't even say that. Well, so it's kind of like, are these people just,
It can be argued, and I'm no lawyer, but it can be argued that if you platform somebody who then says, defamatory things, that they could include you as the vehicle whereby the defamation occurred. But in Don's case, I sent like $20 to his legal defense fund. And we were friends for the rest of his life. All it took was that simple gesture of solidarity. Sure. And suddenly he forgot all about all the stuff about me he didn't like because he realized that I too respected the truth. Mm-hmm. And so, because if he didn't like me, it would have been easy to say, well, suck it up, Cunningham, you deserved it. But he didn't deserve it.
Well, what's funny, man? Like before you messaged me, on Facebook, um, I was gonna make a video, addressing the comments myself for fun, and I had like a perfect comeback, and it was so good.
Well, the jerk store called. They're running out of you.
And but I'm glad we got to talk, and I'm like, she kind of like this guy, so just a simple, reaching out gesture, and we got to talk, and it's like, this guy's actually not bad.
That's the thing. This interaction, actually, it really underscores the double-edged nature of trying to do a show where you talk to people without pressing them critically. Like you as the journalist, let's say, you have two choices. When you bring on a Frank Dux or literally anybody else, you can either listen in a way that encourages them to keep talking, or you can take an advocacy position and press them and make it clear that you are being critical of them, and then they'll either give you an even better interview or a much worse interview, depending on how they react to being pressed. So you're kind of in a no-win situation. And that was why, I heard you talking to Dukes, and I'm like, he's clearly buying everything this guy says. I question his judgment. This shall not stand. I am offended. And I said so, but it was only, I kept listening. Like, it didn't stop me from listening to the subsequent shows. I wasn't like, I will never listen to Viking Samurai again. No, I listened. And then I heard a subsequent interview where you made it clear that you didn't necessarily believe him. I'm like, oh, okay. And you shouldn't have to, like, in the moment of an interview, you shouldn't be interviewing someone and go, by the way, I don't necessarily believe him, because that would be awkward. But at the same time, again, you're in a no-win situation. So all you can do is, I guess, take each situation as it comes. I do feel like some of those moments, like splicing in your Bloodsport joke, that can be taken one of two ways. It can be taken as, I'm on Frank's side and I'm playing into the mythos, or it can be taken as a wink, wink, he said this, isn't that funny?
You never know.
These topics, my interest in them is really not about Frank Dux. I would prefer not to interact with him, and I don't really have anything special in my mind for him. But
you threatened to sue you. Of course you don't. And one quick, real quick,
that was years ago.
One thing I'd like to point out, I'm almost wondering if that's why the Pinkman's videos are down. Those were really popular on YouTube, but that whole channel's gone. I wonder if Frank called that dude.
It's really hard to see. Like, most of the time when someone calls you and threatens to sue you, it's an empty threat. I have known people that it happened to. Like I mentioned years ago, this thing with Don Cunningham. I have friends now who are engaged in lawsuits because they happen to have been in the same state with somebody else that they were contending with online. So it's much easier to sue someone if they happen to be in your state. But my interest in these topics really comes down to, I don't like it when people have to lie. I don't see why we can't just tell the truth. And, you combine that with, I don't like bullies. And what you've got is, there's a whole lot of people, and this is a problem in the martial arts. There's a whole lot of people who lie and bully their way into kind of a false sense of accomplishment. And when they do that, they tend to use tactics, harassing, vicious, nasty tactics against anyone who criticizes them, because they take it personally. And like I said, when someone is questioning your delusional architecture, they're questioning you as a human being. And because this is an unregulated industry, martial arts must be unregulated, because if there was a body that could say this art is real and this art isn't, then they could immediately start gatekeeping, and we'd have illegal, fringe, unrecognized martial arts. We kind of have that now without any kind of regulating body in some cases. So I think it is up to us as a community, and I don't really like to use that term because I don't see everyone who does martial arts as part of a big kumbaya community, but as a body of people interested in this topic, the only measure we can take against fraudulent martial arts and lying teachers is to be critical of things that don't make sense and things that sound false. And if you do come down on the side of, I don't believe you, you haven't hurt this person, you're not destroying their business, you just don't believe them. And that's what people like Frank and everyone else in his orbit, and all the people who aren't Frank but who behave the same way, and all the other martial arts frauds that you could possibly mention, all have in common. They're really mad that you don't believe them. And I have to ask, why? If I say something and someone doesn't believe me, I may get annoyed because I know that I'm telling the truth, but I'm not going to lie awake at night going, he said he didn't believe me. I've got to spam his Facebook page with 1,000 messages and go to every mention of him online and leave nasty comments. By the way, did you know you're fat?
It is the truth.
It's just there's a level of reaction
The
there.
grade school stuff, the middle
Yeah,
school
you
stuff,
mentioned yourself, the grade school stuff, the name calling. It just, after a while, it doesn't make sense for a human being to get that angry about the fact that somebody else disagreed with them. The only reason they get that mad is because there's some deep-seated insecurity about who they are or what they're doing or what they've invested their time and energy and affiliation into. And I think that's worth self investigation. It's worth introspection.
Yeah, no doubt, man. The funny thing, so Frank Dux, as far as I know, wants to have the martial arts world regulated. Like, he doesn't like the fact that it's not regulated, which is interesting. Yeah, okay, that's your reaction. That's
bold
funny.
Bold of him to assume they would come down in his favor if they did.
But no, I get what you're saying as far as if somebody doesn't believe you, like, yeah, it's annoying, but who gives a shit, dude? Like, there's even people that, and I've gotten this stuff since I was 16 years old, that would accuse me, oh, you use steroids. I'm like, no, I don't. I never have in my life. Like, I've been 28 years now, and I'm proud. It's like, why are you pointing out you're a natural guy? Because I'm fucking proud of that, man. Like, I'm very proud of that, especially at my age now, that I could still maintain and even still make some progress. Minimal. It's like driving with the fucking parking brake on when you're a natural guy in your 40s. But, it's, I don't know, man. Like, I'm proud of that. So I'm happy to tell people, like, I'm natural, and, this is actually something that's achievable. It's like, I'm not the biggest guy, but I've gotten pretty good gains, But the fact is, like, people will say, no, you're lying. It's like, I got no reason to lie. I'm not trying to sell you a fucking program. What do I get out of lying, So, yeah, the annoying part I get. But at the end of the day, I don't really give a shit, someone believes
and I've had people go so far as to say, you don't do martial arts. I'm like, yeah, the 20 years of pictures on my Facebook page would say otherwise, but okay. Apparently, I just traveled the world wearing different people's martial arts t-shirts and getting into their group photos. So it's an odd hobby, an oddly specific one.
Hey, where could people, like, follow you to get more? I know you got, like, a podcast or anything you want to plug in general.
Linktree/Phil Elmore has all of my relevant links, the podcast links and the YouTube channel and everything else that I do. So it's like linktr.ee/Phil Elmore, but
okay.
Linktree/Phil Elmore, it's the easy.
Yeah, I'll post it up here. People could check you out if they want to learn more about you and read some of your stuff. Though, like you said, people probably already read your stuff. They just don't know.
That's the thing. You've already got my stuff. You just don't know it.
That's funny.
I appreciate you being understanding of some of the misunderstandings that occur when you're only looking at a tiny window of someone. And I appreciate you having me on.